Skip Weber at the Weber Automotive Group.
The Chevrolet electric truck, I've never driven something with so much power. It's unbelievable how fast and how much torque and how much you can pin yourself and the other passenger to the seat if you really floor it. It's full size. It's a little bit longer than a regular Silverado. It looks like the old Avalanche because it does have that little mid-gate, 4 full doors. It's unbelievable because the electricity is instant power, you know. It's quite amazing. Sometimes the reason why that people will choose this truck over the Chevrolet over another brand or this particular truck over another one because this one has more power and it's tuned this way. The bigger thing is fuel economy, of course. The other electric vehicles, Equinox and Blazer, same thing. Not quite as impressive as the truck, but same thing. They're just so fast, so quickly.
The Weber Automotive Group, Granite City, Columbia, Illinois, Olive 270 and online at WeberChevrolet.com. The Weber Automotive Group. We do a show on Saturday night from 6 until 9 o'clock, and that is all music. A couple of features here and there. Here on Sunday morning, I'm here to spill my guts. You know, just anything we can think of from back in the day, a good story from backstage somewhere at a concert or at a comedy club, around the road, on one of our many trips, really around the world. I mean, I got to see the world on the radio station's, collective dime. I remember right before I moved to St. Louis, I was in Buffalo, New York, and one of our sales secretaries took a trip to Hawaii. And I remember asking her, how much money, did you really need for this? Now, again, this was the early 1980s. And I said, how much money do you need for a trip to Hawaii? I didn't know. And she said about $1,500. And I just remember thinking to myself, where the hell am I ever going to get $1,500? I think I was being paid $23,000 a year back then. Again, this was 1983 into 1984, right before I moved to St. Louis. But then I made the big move, and as they say, and as I often say, the rest is history. I mean, we've just been all over the place. Got to see the world, because that job, especially with TV, where I was going New York and L.A. all the time, over 400 trips, about 175 to Los Angeles, about 225 to New York over about a 14-year period. And my wife at the time was the assistant vice chancellor at Wash U, and they used to do junkets there too. People who would be, heavily endowing the university with cash, and that they would have like special programs where if you donated this amount of money to the university, you get to go on this free trip. And I got to Austria, Germany, with the radio station. We got to London. We got to the former Soviet Union on that Moscow trip. If you can travel and have somebody else pick up the dime, man, that is just the best possible scenario. It's like somebody bringing you free pizza every day. Can't beat it. We are busting into our Christmas library today. I've got some cool stuff to play for you as we get rolling along with the show. We finish off every Sunday morning at about 8:45 or so with a feature called It Sucked Then, It Sucks Now. And today we got a band that, for all intents and purposes, didn't even exist, but they had the number one song in 1969. I'll get into all that a little bit later on. We're going to talk a little bit about Christine McVie this morning because we lost her 3 years ago this week. This is the anniversary this weekend of the 1979 Who concert in Cincinnati, where a bunch of people got trampled. I asked Roger Daltrey about that when he was in St. Louis when the Who did the Quadrophenia album out at Riverport. I think we were still calling it Riverport at that time. And so you're going to hear him give his account of that night in Cincinnati. And it was 35 years ago this week that the entire Midwest came to a grinding halt. When I say Midwest, I'm talking like a big circle, the whole center part of the country, because a fellow by the name of Dr. Ivan Browning had the world convinced that there was going to be an earthquake. If you were around then, you probably remember watching a video or something like that where, you learned how to turn off your gas, turn off your water, just in case it actually happened. And people were Velcroing down their valuables, things that were hanging on the wall and stuff like that. The most fascinating part about it, I think, is that the guy was a climatologist. That's not even a guy who deals with earthquakes. But for whatever reason, he felt it necessary to alert the world that the whole New Madrid fault was going to go 35 years ago this week. So we'll get into all that a little bit later on. But as we always do to start the show, we call it the Weekend Pickup, a series of semi-psychotic, very, very unimportant, dumb stories that, if you're lucky, flew under your radar. But luckily, you have me here on Sunday morning to tell you about them anyhow. Let's go to press. I'm loving the story about the Waymo people. Now, I didn't even know what a Waymo was until John Mulaney was doing his show, and they had a Waymo guy, or a Waymo machine, rather. What do you call it? A vehicle, I guess, come out and disperse soft drinks to everybody on his short-lived show, which I believe was on Netflix. And then you're like, okay, I get it. It's like the robotic thing. He didn't have a car. He had like a little beverage cart. But in downtown St. Louis, starting this weekend, now the Waymo cars that you're going to see are pretty easily identifiable because they got the thing on the roof. But also, there's going to be people inside just as they get this thing started, I guess, as a fail-safe maneuver. So they will have people in the Waymo units for now. What I wonder about with regard to Waymo, because you're thinking to yourself, well, here you go. We're living in the future. We've been told we were going to have driverless cars for a long time, and now we do have them, although they're still working the glitches out. My favorite was the one where, I don't know, like 25 cars all congregated in this parking lot in Chicago and started flashing their lights and beeping their horns for no reason. They're all just sitting there in the parking lot, honk, honk, and the lights are flashing. People are like, what the hell is going on? But what I don't get is this. What I don't get is this. Everybody's all excited about these driverless cars. Aren't we sort of gearing up for these pods? They're going to pick us up in our driveway and then fly us to wherever we're going. So why would I be interested in something that's going to be obsolete in a couple of years? Because Tampa is one of the cities where they're trying these things. Now, I haven't seen one, but Tampa is one of the cities where they're trying these pods. Where you just get in, it's like one or two people, and the thing takes off and flies you to wherever you're going. It's pretty expensive right now, but they insist, like everything else, once it spreads, the price will come down. I don't need no Waymo. Like I said, that's going to be obsolete if these flying cars actually become a thing. And why wouldn't they, right? There were parts of the United States this past week that were colder than the planet Mars. Maybe not at night, because Mars is one of those planets, once the sun goes down, that's it. You're like, 30, 40, 50 below zero. But the high temperature during the day is usually about 30 degrees, 20 degrees, something like that. And there were parts of the country, giant parts of the country, that didn't even get that warm this past couple of days. I posted this earlier on Facebook, the Showgram with J.C. Corcoran, the Showgram with J.C. Corcoran on Facebook. And I said, I wish I was kidding about this, but I'm not. Fox 2 is doing a story this week about underwater UFOs, which actually is a misnomer because it wouldn't be a flying object if it was underwater. But then, just about the time I was, sort of getting snarky with Fox 2 about the whole thing, now I'm seeing the story everywhere. So maybe Fox 2 should actually get credit because at least they had it before everybody else. My daughter is only 16 years old, so it wasn't that long ago that, I just try to fill her head with knowledge. It's just like you get a kid and it's like a computer with an empty hard drive. And it's up to you to put software on there and then put functional stuff. So I just try to teach her everything I can. The problem is that I'm now repeating myself and it's really irritating her. I'll get like 4 or 5 words into my big story and she'll go, I know, you told me. But it wasn't that long ago that I was... By the way, the other day, she didn't understand what the term trim the tree meant. Because they put up the Christmas tree. I said, okay, can you go in there and trim it for me? She's like, trim the tree? like she's got to take out cloppers or something. It's like, no, it doesn't mean physically trim the tree. Never mind. But when you got kids, like I said, you try to fill up their heads with knowledge. And here's a perfect one trying to explain the term irony. What does the term irony mean? For some kid who's 10 years old, they'd never heard that word before. So you try to come up with an explanation, an example that will illustrate to them what the term irony means. And we had an example last weekend when Winterfest had to be shut down because of bad weather. Too much snow, wind, and cold. We're closing Winterfest. Irony. I have this thing I like to do with little kids. There's no little kids around here anymore because all of her friends are her age. They're 16. But when they were, 10, 11 years old, I had this thing. I said, there's no such thing as a dark cloud. And they would sort of look at each other like, yes, there is. I've seen dark clouds. Go, nope, there's no such thing as a dark cloud. And then they start arguing with me. I've seen dark clouds, Mr. JC. And I go, okay, here's the deal. When you look up there and a cloud looks dark, if you see it from the other side, like if you're in a plane and you go over the top of the clouds, those clouds are all white. So you're just seeing the cloud from the bottom instead of the top, but that cloud is white. And then what I do is I take a lamp with a very bright light bulb, and I take a piece of white paper, and I hold up the piece of paper to the light. I say, now, see, you can see the light behind the piece of paper, right? Okay. But when clouds, which are vapor and have some degree of density, when they get really large, what happens is they're blocking out the light. The color of the cloud hasn't changed. The color of what you see has changed. But the cloud is still white. And I hold up the piece of paper, to the light bulb, and you can see the light bulb right through the piece of paper. But then I grab like 20 pieces of paper, and then I hold that up to the light bulb, and I say, now, what do you see? You don't see any light. Same thing happens when you're outside and you see a dark cloud. All that's happening is the light is being blocked, and so it gives the illusion of the cloud being dark. I'm great around kids. They look at you with faces like, can we watch TV now? We're tired of listening to you. Well, you can hate on Mariah Carey as much as you want, but man, this is depressing. She makes $2.5 million in royalties every year for just the song All I Want for Christmas Is You. $2.5 million for just sitting on her ass and doing nothing. The weather was bad over the holidays for the most part, over a big chunk of the country. And so you know what people did? They watched TV. Even that Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, 34.5 million viewers. But then that Chiefs-Cowboys game on Thanksgiving Day, 57 million viewers for CBS. That makes it the most watched regular season NFL game in history. Did you hear what I said? History! Speaking of TV, Season 3 of Euphoria will debut in April. That's important to a lot of people. Martin Scorsese is producing a 1-hour drama for Netflix about the modern-day gambling business in Las Vegas. On the Saturday show, I do hear the theme music I use is from a band from back in the 1960s called The Marqués. And then the music I use for this show on Sunday morning is done by Booker T and the MGs. In both of those bands, legendary guitarist Steve Cropper, who was also in the Blues Brothers along with Belushi and Aykroyd. Steve Cropper died a couple of days ago. He was 84. Tremendous musical resume from that guy. And there's still people all bent out of shape over the selection of Bad Bunny as the Super Bowl halftime act. Well, it turns out maybe you didn't know who Bad Bunny is, but the rest of the free world does. The most streamed artist in the world for a record-setting 4th year, Bad Bunny on Spotify. Taylor Swift still number 1 in the United States for a 3rd time. Winning the Jussie Smollett Award this week is Tara Reid. You may recall that she was all drunk off her ass, insisting that somebody had drugged her, put something in her drink while she had looked away or gone to the bathroom or something like that. And she's in a wheelchair and all stretched out, acting like she's out of her mind. And the police, and I don't know who else was involved in this, investigated the whole thing, and there's absolutely nothing to suggest that Tara Reid's version of what happened actually took place. What happened is she had too much to drink, but she lost track the whole thing somewhere along the way. She didn't even know what her name was. She was so whacked out. They've got surveillance video, and they're like, we looked, we checked everything, and we even checked the residue in the glass and the whole thing, and no, there's nothing to your story, sweetheart. There's an old term that has more to do with horses than anything else, with ridden hard and hung up wet. I think of that phrase when I see Tara Reid. Boy, at one time, she was a knockout, too. Oh, my God. What was that movie, Body Shots, I think it was, where she was topless in that and just looked fantastic. And right after that, she started aging at Mach speed. Paul Anka, for those of you too young to recall, he was a pop singer back in the 60s and 70s. He also wrote the theme to The Tonight Show. And another guy who was sitting on his ass doing nothing, making money from royalties every time the Tonight Show theme got played. Da, 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 da. He wrote that. And then he had some songs in the 70s like You're Having My Baby. It was really awful stuff. And he did a little hanging out with Frank Sinatra and used to go to the same gym or club or whatever it was and saw Frank Sinatra naked a lot and insists that Frank was packing heat, major heat. Which leads us to our next story, nude cruises. There's so many germs on cruise ships that I don't even want to get on one with people who got clothes on. A cruise company called Bare Necessities revealed there's one major rule that applies only to men. You can probably guess what it is. No erections. Well, what are you supposed to do if nature takes over and you're on the nude cruise and you see somebody who looks pretty damn good? What are you supposed to say? Sorry. You ever get this idea that the war between Russia and Ukraine never going to end? Russia has unveiled spy pigeons. They have brain implants that allows them to be steered remotely, but they're real pigeons. You probably haven't seen any of these movies because the motion picture industry, Hollywood, likes to hold everything back until November and December so they get all that Oscar buzz. One battle after another tops Rolling Stone's list of the best movies of the year, followed by Hamnet, Black Bag, Train Dreams, and Nouvelle Vogue. Like I said, nobody's seen any of them. Most of them haven't even opened yet in St. Louis. Taylor Swift has figured out how to make even more money with a movie that was shot during the Eras Tour. It hits Disney Plus on December 12th. John Popper from Blues Traveler could really play a harmonica. That guy was talented. And he can sing, but he was a big fat guy. It turns out he married a woman that he stole away from porn star Ron Jeremy while they were at a nudist camp. I feel like I should be dipped in disinfectant just for reading that story. All right, birthdays this week. Britney Spears turned 44. Sarah Silverman, 55. Bette Midler is now 80. Ozzy would have been 77. Amanda Seyfried from Mamma Mia and Les Mis is 40. Brendan Fraser, 57. Julianne Moore, 65. Daryl Hannah, 65. Fred Armisen, 59. Marissa Tomei, 61. Jeff Bridges, 76. Max Baird Jr., Jethro, is 88. Jim Messina, as in Loggins and Messina, turned 78 on Friday. Yesterday, Judd Apatow turned 58. Stephen Wright turned 70. And today would have been the birthday of Harry Chapin. And this week, back in 1993, Frank Zappa died 32 years ago. He was only 52. He had prostate cancer. Oh, and you know what else it's the anniversary of? Back in 2006, I remember this because we were in the midst of a power failure at our house, but the power came on just in time for me to flip on the TV, go to Fox Sports Midwest, where St. Louis Blues superstar goal-scoring machine Brett Hull was being lifted into the rafters. What? No. He took the jersey off and they just lifted that into the rafters. Sorry.
And as 16 raises up into the rafters, I don't want you just to applaud that. I want you to applaud every person that ever wore the blue note, and I want you to applaud yourself, because there may be equals, but there are no better hockey fans in the world. And as much as I'm remiss about not being able to hoist the cup down Market Street, with the new leadership of Mr. Checketts and John Davidson, this organization is going in the right direction. And stick with them, and they will lead you the right way. I thank you. This is my extreme honor and privilege to be in front of you.
The man knows how to have a good time. Those were two separate recordings, of course. One was at Scottrade where they were lifting his jersey into the rafters, and the other one was the Blues Stanley Cup parade, and Brett up there on stage under the arch. Drunk as Hull. All right, there it is, the weekend pickup. That's how we start the show here on Sunday mornings on News Talk STL 101.9, 94.1. Did you see the quote from the guy from Live Nation? Live Nation is the big corporation that puts on the majority of concerts all over the country, including St. Louis, of course. And this is the head guy. This is the CEO. And he was doing some sort of, symposium or like a guest speaker or something like that. And the subject of concert tickets and how expensive concert tickets have become. And he says, actually, concert tickets should cost a lot more. And he cited some numbers and adjusted to inflation and all that sort of stuff. All I know is the first few concerts I went to were like, I don't know, $15. There were even some that were like $2.50. And I mean $2.50. And again, Cokes were a dime too. And the average income for a worker in the United States of America back then was like $9,000. So I think the most I ever paid for concert tickets was that Simon and Garfunkel show back around, maybe it was like 2002, 2003, something like that. It was a fantastic show, and I'm really glad I went. But $500 for 2 tickets to see Simon and Garfunkel? And I talk to people all the time, and we talk about stuff like this. And a lot of people just haven't been to a live concert in years because they just said this is out of control, and I can't afford this. And I am no longer amongst the section of American people who goes to concerts. It's just too damn expensive. But for those of you under the age of probably 40, I guess, you don't remember. There used to be this thing called general admission. Now, they tried to dress it up a little bit, and they started calling it festival seating. Festival seating. Yeah, it's general admission. It's first come, first served. You would buy your ticket for, $10, $15, $20, something like that. And then you would go get in line the night of the show. There was no assigned seating. It was, you think those free-for-alls at Southwest Airlines back in the day were something. You should have seen this. And in fact, in 1979, this week in 79, The Who was playing a concert venue in Cincinnati, Ohio. And pushing turned into shoving, and shoving turned into more pushing, and a couple of kids got squished and were killed. And it was a real black mark on The Who, even though, as you'll hear now from Roger Daltrey, who was very kind to answer the question. Well, he explained the whole thing.
And that while it will always be remembered as the Cincinnati Who concert, that you guys probably would wish that somehow that wouldn't have happened and that would all go away.
Well, of course you wish it wouldn't have happened. I mean, we knew nothing about it at all until the end of the show. From the front, it happened before the show started. It happened at 7:30 in the evening, and we weren't even in the hall. The band weren't even at the venue when it happened. But they didn't know what to do. It was a bad situation, which they felt at the time, because they had, a large crowd inside. There'd be people suffering in one of the doorways. They didn't open enough of the doorways for the crowd to get in. They made the decision that it was better to let the concert go on. I mean, and let's be honest, if they'd have told us what had happened before we had arrived at the show, I don't know whether we could have gone on. So that might have turned a bad situation into a worse one. It's very difficult, and of course it's one of those things you live with all your life, and if you could change it, you would, but unfortunately you can't. That is part of life.
Like I was saying, it was a very, very delicate situation there. I handed to him for addressing it and giving his side of the story. He didn't even have to answer that question. He could have just said, look, I don't want to talk about it. Next. But people who just started going to concerts in the last 10 or 20 years, they don't even understand all that stuff that preceded what we now know as the 2025 concert going experience, because that was the end of general admission. I think there's even some states that ban festival seating and general admission. So that's why you pays your money, you get your ticket, and you sit down and you wait for somebody to stand up for the entire show and ruin the experience for you. That's the other reason people have stopped going to concerts. 2 years ago at the El Monstero show in the summer of 2023, I had some drunk about 3 rows in front of me decided to stand for the entire show. And then for like the last 3 or 4 songs, he stood facing all of us. He had his back to the stage. People pay a lot of money to go to these shows, and the venues, the concert venues, they don't want to get involved in any of this. Their opinion is you buy your ticket and you are entitled to that space, meaning the seat and the area in front of it. And if you want to stand, you take it up with the crowd. You take it up with the people sitting around you. We're not getting involved. I don't think that's a good policy, by the way. And I have a great relationship with Live Nation. They've been very, very kind to us. And in fact, a couple of people we know really, really well work there and have worked there for a long time. One of our old producers, John Canavera, is a big shot with Live Nation and has been for quite a while now. But as far as the CEO is concerned, even if you were thinking that, you're thinking to yourself, the concert ticket should really cost more. What do you gain by saying that out loud? All that's going to happen is that people are going to hate you. All right, we're through Thanksgiving, and a lot of people made it a holiday tradition, and it's been that way for a lot of people for a long time, to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and for good reason, too. It's such a good movie, and the guys are so good in it. When I finished watching the movie, I guess about 10 days ago, just for fun, I went looking for something to see if it was there, and it sure was on YouTube. I guess this was right about the time that John Candy, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Joe Flaherty, Martin Short, all those people who did SCTV, Second City TV. And it came on late at night on the weekend, and it was sort of like Saturday Night Live, but no live audience and just a completely different feel. But it was sketch comedy, and it was really, really funny stuff. They shot the whole thing in Edmonton, Alberta. And I've talked to a lot of the people from SCTV, and they were like, it was the best situation you could ever have. We were so far away from any of the network brass that they didn't interfere because we were in freaking Canada. And so we would just do what we did, and we would send the show to the network, and the network would put it on. And that was pretty much it. Like I said, launched the careers of a lot of people. So that show ran its course, and then you had stuff like Not Necessarily the News on HBO, which was a pretty good show as well. And then you had Fridays on ABC, Michael Richards from Seinfeld. They had a really attractive gal who did the weekend update type news thing named Melanie Chartoff, and she was really good too, and easy on the eyes. So right about the time all this was happening, John Candy and Eugene Levy hatched this thing. And I know a lot of people do not remember this, but I can tell you that amongst comedy circles, people who are really, really seriously into comedy, and especially people in the business who are comedy writers for people like, when Letterman was on the air and Conan and stuff like that. People who are comedy writers, this is like the kind of movie they can recite lines from at the drop of a hat. And it was sort of a parody of The Last Waltz from the band, and this was called The Last Polka. And the premise was that Eugene Levy and John Candy were these two musicians, Eugene Levy on the accordion and John Candy on the clarinet, and they were from a country called Lutonia, and they were trying to make it big as polka performers. Not unlike the scene from Home Alone, where John Candy is in the van with Catherine O'Hara, and they're giving her a free ride to Chicago. Except this was an entire movie, a mockumentary. Yash and Stan Schmengi, The Last Polka. One of the funniest things I have ever seen in my life, and a cult classic. Someday they'll re-release that, and people who don't even know what I'm talking about right now will finally get a chance to see it.
Yash and Stan, yeah, their voices were like this because they were from Lutonia.
And they were trying to make it big in the concert business. And in one scene, what they did is on the marquee, it says, appearing tonight, Michael Jackson. And people start buying tickets like crazy. But what you can't see, you got to go right up to the marquee, and in very, very small print, it says, Yash and Stan Schmengi sing the songs of, and then in giant letters, Michael Jackson. But you don't see that part unless you got your nose right up against the marquee. And for years, I watched that movie just assuming that they were going through the motions of playing musical instruments. Well, it turns out John Candy plays the clarinet and Eugene Levy plays the accordion. So they were really up there playing. If you go to YouTube and you decide to watch this, there's one scene near the end of the movie that is really, really funny. Now, again, this is like Spinal Tap or something like that. It's a mockumentary. I guess what they did, based on the cutaway shots to the audience, they must have bussed in a bunch of people from retirement homes. It's all these people in their 80s and 90s, and they make up the entire audience in this big arena, and then Yash and Stan come out and they start playing their signature song that, as you'll hear, includes audience participation, their big hit song, Cabbage Rolls and Coffee. I grew up in a Polish neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago, right next to Midway Airport, and polka music was prevalent, okay? So I didn't want to hear it, but it was there all the time. In other words, I know of what I speak. And I heard more than one polka band do this where they don't know how to end the song, so they just have about 10 false endings. The Schmengis. And in this mockumentary, one of the other really funny parts is that in Lutonia, which is where they're from, they have a Christmas tradition where the men exchange socks with one another. I'm not saying you go to the store and you buy a pair of socks and then give it to the other guy. You take off the socks that you're wearing, and then you give them to your friend, and he takes his socks off, and you exchange socks that way. This movie is so funny. And I don't know what happened because it flew under a lot of people's radar. And, you're probably listening to this right now going, what the hell is he talking about? So, like I said, just if you're a fan of Eugene Levy and John Candy and you sort of like that whole sketch comedy, SCTV type thing and the whole Spinal Tap mockumentary thing, just go to YouTube and look for the last polka with the Schmengi brothers with Eugene Levy and John Candy.
Radio? Who needs a radio?
Like what you're hearing? Don't forget JC's Wayback Machine every Saturday night from 6 until 9 on 101.9 and 94.1 News Talk STL and the free News Talk STL app.
He was calling somebody in Washington a liar. And then he went, he's a liar, the liar, the liar, John Lovitz. John Lovitz. The show's not as good anymore. It's not as good anymore. We don't watch the show, but they got a new guy doing me. I hear he's pretty good.
Oh, my goodness. Because I know you're a fan of Bob Dylan.
I know you're a fan of Bob Dylan. I'm a fan of Bob Dylan. Because if you ever listen to him on Sirius XM, he's like,
Theme Time Radio on Sirius XM. You're listening to Bob Dylan. Today's theme is flowers.
hydrangeas, chrysanthemums.
Maybe could we hear Bob Dylan singing Jingle Bells?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we could maybe start it off with that folky Greenwich Village Bob Dylan. Here, let me get this harmonica here. This will be helpful.
Okay. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride.
He's always giggling on these songs.
What fun it is to ride. I think Calvin Coolidge said that.
It's like some professionalism, please, Bob.
But then he did. How about the crooner when he did the crooner kind of
the Lay Lady Lay?
Oh, yeah, the
Nashville Skyline. Bob Dylan. He had a completely different voice all of a sudden.
Yes, he had.
It's like
jingle bells, I jingle all the way. What fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Why are you singing like that?
But then he did the whole rock band tour, the Rolling Thunder.
And he's touring all over the world. He's filling arenas. He's got the Rolling Thunder Review Band. That's my favorite Dylan because he's unintelligible. He's just screaming.
Yeah, here we go. Oh, we're dashing through the snow. Ooh, and over those open sleigh. Oh, over the fields we go. Oh, the sleigh is off tonight.
I can hear you, Bob.
Yeah.
I'm 2 towns over. I can hear you.
He can hear you. I don't even need the microphone there. 90s Dylan.
And he's just singing like a Disney vulture. He's singing like he crawled out of a French crypt or something. And the songs have this moody sexiness to them.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way.
Oh, God.
Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Oh, my God! Come on now. James Austin Johnson, everyone. We'll be right back with a performance from Anne Juliet. Stick around, everybody.
Jingle all the way. Jingle all the way. Oh, what fun. Oh, what fun. And it's a ride. It's a ride. And I want to go. Oh, what's your jingle bell? Jingle bell. Oh, jingle the bell. Oh, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Jimmy Fallon and James Austin Johnson from Saturday Night Live having a little too much fun right there here on JC Sunday Showgram 94.1, 101.9, and the free News Talk STL app. I couldn't tell you for sure that I know exactly what a climatologist does, but I can tell you that it doesn't appear to have anything to do with earthquakes. But that didn't stop Dr. Ivan Browning 35 years ago this week. He says, and I don't know why anybody was listening to this guy, because I think a lot of people just assumed he was a crackpot. But yeah, somehow he got some sort of forum, and I guess the wire services picked up on it. Next thing you know, everybody's talking about this prediction that Dr. Ivan Browning says that conditions are right for a huge earthquake in the New Madrid Fault. And the next thing you know is that everybody pretty much went nuts. And if you were here 35 years ago, anywhere across the Midwest, you know what I'm talking about. People were like, okay, what do? I gotta put all my valuables away, anything that could break, anything that could fall off a shelf, my pottery, my mirrors, all that sort of stuff. People were selling industrial strength Velcro stuff so you could Velcro things down. So if there was an earthquake, no, another one happened. And then everybody learned how to turn off their gas. And everybody learned how to turn off their water. And people were buying these wrenches. And there were videos being sold. And television stations were doing half-hour and hour-long specials telling you what to do to prepare for this whole thing. And the whole thing just sort of took on a life of its own. And given the fact that we like to be in the middle of all this stuff, and considering it was only about a 3-hour drive from St. Louis, we made the decision to go down there and broadcast live. Well, once Channel 5 found out that we were going to be broadcasting live, I was working there, and they said, well, would you mind doing TV as well? I was like, sure, the more the merrier. So I'm doing television live shots, and the first thing that happens when we got down, well, on the way down, because we went down a day early, and on the way down we stopped. And for me, it was the first time experiencing the culinary sophistication of the home of throwed rolls, Lambert's Cafe. A lot of okra down there. So we did that, and then got really, really an awful hotel. Because when you get down to New Madrid, and you know who's from there is Heidi Glaus. Heidi used to be on Channel 5 for a number of years, and she's doing radio now. And I feel so bad for her, because you want to talk about an impoverished community. Jeez. I mean, you want to talk about God for God. Oh, my goodness. And we come pulling into town, and I'm like, look at all the satellite trucks. Because back then, it's not like it is now where you can just have a little camera or even just an iPhone, and you can use FaceTime. You can pretty much broadcast from anywhere. But back in those days, you had to have one of these big honking satellite uplink things. It wasn't the length of a semi, but it was as high as a semi, and you had this big satellite dish on top. And the reporter and the engineer would send the signal up to the satellite up in outer space, and then it would bounce down to New York or to St. Louis or to wherever it was that you were televising from. We got down there, and I started counting these satellite dishes, these satellite trucks, and there were 29 of them. Because you figure every city in the Midwest, every major city in the Midwest sent a reporter from each of the TV stations. So back then, this is sort of predated Fox. So let's just say there's 3, CBS, NBC, ABC, times all of the cities that sent reporters down. And that would include, obviously, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Memphis, Atlanta, Little Rock, Indianapolis, Chicago. And then, of course, all 3 networks, the big guys. I still remember Russ Mitchell, who was a weekender on Channel 4 back in the day, back in the 80s, and then he bounces out of St. Louis to CBS News in New York, and they sent him. And Russ is a good guy, too. Russ is a really cool guy, and so it was fun sort of reconnecting with him. We're like, what the hell are we all doing here? We're all standing around. Of course, we did the entire show. Nothing happened. Nothing ever did. And that was 35 years ago this week. And even though there was a little rumble in the New Madrid area a couple of days ago, there's always that stuff going on. But no big earthquake, no nothing. And a lot of people really felt stupid. Some people felt conned. I bought all this stuff. I bought all this emergency stuff because people were afraid that maybe this guy was right. And you got to err on the side of safety and caution. And so people bought all this extra food. And like I said, they bought all these wrenches and everything to turn off their gas and their water, and buying Velcro so that nothing falls off and breaks. We felt like idiots. And you may have noticed that even though this was the 35th anniversary the last couple of days, you didn't see it anywhere. The only person talking about this is me. And I really do think it's because people felt so duped and so embarrassed and so stupid for getting sucked into this whole thing from Dr. Iben Browning, the climatologist who got into the earthquake business. I guess maybe people don't even want to relive it. They don't want to. They don't want to remember what happened. Was there a whole lot of shaking going on?
No. No.
It's JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL.
I went to Northern Illinois University, and in 73, I'm trying to remember if it was the Mystery to Me album or the Penguin album, but one of those 2 albums had come out, and they were on tour to promote the whole thing. And, Mick Fleetwood, frankly, had just really, within the last handful of years, converted Fleetwood Mac from a blues band with Peter Green, back in 69 and everything like that. And now you're talking early 70s, 1973, and they're pushing songs like Hypnotized and Bermuda Triangle and stuff like that. And I still remember thinking to myself, this is a good band. These people are pretty good. And who's the cute blonde up there? And she sings so well. Isn't that cool? Well, 2 years later, we are all listening to the very first Fleetwood Mac album with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. And as I often say, and the rest is history. Right, Lindsay?
I picked up a copy of Frozen Love, the album that you did, Buckingham Nicks. And I remember thinking to myself, where did you guys hope that would get you? A pair of virtually unknown musicians in Southern California.
Well, I'm not sure that we thought of it that way. Yes, Frozen Love was kind of an epic track, but obviously it connected with Mick when he heard Frozen Love, which was actually the track that he heard, and he asked me to join. They were looking for a guitarist, and I said, "Well, you got to take my girlfriend too."
And how was that received by Mick when you said the girl's got to come along?
He said, "I'll get back to you." And I think he checked with Christine, and she said, "Fine." And that group has had more. Even before we joined, I think that there were more incarnations of Fleetwood Mac than of any other group I can think of. And this was all really Mick just doing what he had to do to keep the group going. And to his credit, he must have intuitively felt there was something waiting down the road.
I mean, just think about that. It might not be the kind of thing that caught a lot of people's attention, but if you do think about it, here's Christine McVie and the prevailing attitude by bands that had one woman in the band is like, she's the woman. She's the woman in the band. We don't do two. And Christine was like, why not? I mean, for one thing, as she told me back in 1990, being around all those boys on the road can be challenging.
Christine, every couple of years, the press kind of sees something like what happened at the Grammys the other night, and they say, it's going to be the rebirth of women in rock and roll, and isn't this great? This is going to be a new trend, and blah, 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 blah. What's the state of affairs?
Well, I can only speak for myself. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm very lucky. I'm with a group of gentlemen. 99% of the time, and they're great, and they treat me with respect, and I return that respect. And it's, I know that some other women find it tough, and it can be hard work. But that's the downside. If that is a downside, it's hard work. But that's great.
She was so nice and so personable and so charming. 94.1, 101.9, and News Talk STL, the free app. One of the main reasons we are here on Saturday night and Sunday morning is because of Skip Weber. Weber Chevrolet, known as the Weber Automotive Group, with 3 locations, Granite City, Columbia, Illinois, Olive and 270, and online at weberchevrolet.com. They also have a Ford dealership in Illinois, in Granite City, and they have a lot of service vehicles and delivery vans and things like that. If your company, your business requires something like that, those kinds of vehicles, you got to check that place out too. All available for your perusal at weberchevrolet.com, the Weber Automotive Group. A lot of families have Christmas traditions as far as movies are concerned, and I don't even want to start on the Die Hard thing because I don't want to get into an argument with anybody. I don't happen to believe that a movie that has something like 22 killings in it has anything to do with Christmas, but that's me.
What about Lethal Weapon that has a lot less killing, but also happens at Christmas?
It has a lot less killing. Okay, yeah. That's the barometer we're using now. There's not as many murders as in Die Hard, so it's very Christmassy. Do you have a tradition in your family or anything around the holidays?
Well,
anything
yes,
that you watch every year?
And that's something that we lost this year too, without the whole family being together on Thanksgiving. We normally watch It's a Wonderful Life to start the Christmas season out sometime during Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving time. And so we got to still get to that. And then the other thing that we watch, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this before, but I think the finest Christmas movie ever made is the movie Scrooge.
Oh,
with Albert Finney.
Yeah,
not Scrooge with Bill Murray, but the story of Dickens' Christmas Carol with Albert Finney, and it's a musical. And I think it is just marvelously done. It's extremely faithful to the book, which most of the versions are. But the songs are infectious, and the heart tugging, and the emotions Albert Finney puts in it. I've watched it at least 50 times because I've watched it every year of my life practically, and I cannot keep from completely bawling my eyes out at the
Yeah.
end. It's just so well done.
My daughter turned me on to a movie that I don't know how I missed it when it was new, but now we watch it every year, and that's a thing called The Christmas Chronicles. Kurt Russell plays Santa Claus in this movie, and there's two little kids that are absolutely sensational, and it was made by the same people who made Home Alone. And the special effects are great. The story is great. There's some big laughs in this movie, and also there's a couple of cameos where you go, wait a minute, is that who I think it is? And it is, and I won't spoil it for anybody. But have you gotten around to that movie at all?
No, I've heard of it, and so and I think there's even the Christmas Chronicles 2.
There is,
which
yeah.
reminded me that I want to see the first one. So yeah, I'll have to try it.
But I will tell you that my all-time favorite Christmas movie, and I preface this with a little bit of an asterisk, because for people who say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch this thing because I'm tired of hearing JC talk about it, so I'll sit down and I'll watch it. And, like a half an hour in, they're going, he said this was a Christmas movie. What the hell is he talking about? But you just have to stay with it. And the movie is with Danny Aiello and Anthony LaPaglia and Robert Forster and Lainie Kazan. And the movie is called 29th Street. About the only place you can find it is on YouTube.
29th Street?
29th Street. Let's shift gears here and talk a little business. It would seem that business would be down a little bit, and you'd probably have the place to yourself. Do I know what I'm talking about?
Well, that's historically what December was, but it kind of has smoothed out a little bit in recent years, the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. So we have pretty decent Decembers, not like a June or July. It's not a ghost town anymore. I guess it's because not only do people do more shopping online for cars, but people do more shopping online for their Christmas gifts. And it's not like people are writing a check for a car. So getting into a new vehicle when we can tell you that your first payment is not due for 90 days, who cares if they make that decision in December, because you're not going to be paying for it during the time you're paying all these other bills also anyway. So it has gotten a little bit better like that. Traditionally, our busiest week of the year is the week between Christmas and New Year's. That has also slowed down and smoothed out because it has, once again, for the same reasons, the people are not, quote unquote, keeping their purse strings tied and spending all their time preparing for Christmas, with the emergence of the online shopping. So whatever the case is, I can tell you this: Chevrolet and all car manufacturers were disappointed with November. I didn't realize that everybody was mad about November until I got into some of these calls. And then I read some articles about the whole industry. Everybody was disappointed in the volume of November. And so our incentives have increased to an even bigger position. So there are some great deals to be had out there on new vehicles, and having a good November means we have a lot of pre-owned vehicles too. So I think we're going to put in the position to make a lot of great deals, make a lot of people happy for this month.
Weber Chevrolet, the Weber Automotive Group, Granite City, Columbia, Illinois, Olive and 270, and online WeberChevrolet.com, and of course the Ford dealership over in Metro East. All right, we're closing in on the big day. We'll talk to you in a couple of days. Skip Weber from Weber Chevrolet. Talk soon. Thanks.
Thanks, JC. Take care.
It's JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL.
Because people are always asking me, who are the nice people and who are the not so nice people that you've interviewed? And I've talked about this a million times before. I estimate that I've interviewed somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 celebrities. Now, a lot of those celebrities were people who were in movies, and maybe they did a movie or two and you never heard from them again. But I've legitimately interviewed at least 2,000 real celebrities. And if you're thinking to yourself, are there 2,000 celebrities? Well, over the course of the last 40 years, yeah, that's how long we've been doing this. 43 to be exact. So that's like 1,000 every 10 years. It's 500 every 5 years. You can get your head around that. So I started making a list of all the nice ones first, and these are in no particular order. Uma Thurman is on the nice list. She was so sweet, just had the nicest smile. She was so welcoming and just absolutely sweet. What I got? John Goodman is on there. Melissa Etheridge. I got to tell you, the Melissa Etheridge story, this was in the late 90s, and I was at Channel 4. So you got to remember, it's not like things are now where you just go to the internet or you go to YouTube. If you need a piece of video or something, it's there. But back in the day, back in the 90s, movie studios, record companies, they actually had to physically send you a video either in the mail or they had to overnight it to you or whatever, and it came on those big clunky VCR type tapes. They were much bigger. The television versions were much bigger and required different machines, but there was the same concept. You had a videotape cassette, basically. And she came in to promote a show, and wouldn't you know it, the record company didn't get me the tape fast enough. So now I'm supposed to do a piece on Melissa Etheridge for the 5 o'clock news. I have no footage of her performing. And I tell her this, and she's like, well, you got a couple of minutes? And I was like, yeah, why? She goes, I'll be right back. She went out to her car, got her guitar, got her makeup bag. She went into the ladies' room and boofed her hair out as best as she could, put some makeup on, and came out and performed live in the Channel 4 studio, which we were then able to record and use in the piece. That's pretty special, and she's really, really nice. Jim Lovell, Tom Hanks played him in Apollo 13. Robin Williams makes it on the list. John Travolta makes it on the list. As I've said, all those Scientology people, they're crazy, but if you're trying to interview them, they are the best interviews ever, I'm telling you. Madonna is on the list. I'm sure that comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but she had just had her first baby, I want to say it was either 3 or 4 months before I got to her for the interview, and so I think she was, in mom mode, if you know what I mean. Casey Kasem goes on the list. Well, again, I'm sure for people who hear that, is Don on the phone? Get Don on the phone. I want somebody to use their effing brain. But not only was he nice, he actually had sort of a childlike quality to him. It was very, very surprising. Andy Rooney, another guy who has a reputation for being really crusty and sort of grumpy, but he sure was nice to me that day. Paul Schaefer, definitely on the list. David Letterman on the list. You got to get him at the right time. Oh, he bristled. I interviewed him, had to be almost 10 times. And there were 1 or 2 interviews where I said something where he bristled a little bit, but it didn't ruin the interview or anything. It's just that you had to be careful, all right? You just had to be careful. Then people want to know the real list. Who were the a-holes? Okay, Tommy Lee Jones is on that list. Joan Rivers is on that list. Bill O'Reilly is on that list. Whoopi Goldberg, Bill Maher, Jerry Seinfeld. And I don't know if he falls under the a-hole category, but he has said in interviews that he believes that he is on the spectrum and that he does have difficulty talking to people, especially people who are not comedians. So it just might be some sort of a disorder that he has, but he got pretty snarly a couple of times. And Henry Fonda, man, oh man, I don't know what his deal was, but I think it was 80 or 81. And I was working in Omaha, Johnny Carson's old station, WOW. And Henry Fonda came into Omaha, and it's where they're from. The family is from Omaha. He grew up there. And this was right towards the last year or so of his life. And there was just something emotionally wrong with him at that time. And no matter what you said or what you did, he just chewed your head off right at the brain stem. And frankly, I didn't even do an interview with him. I was there watching other people do interviews. And when I saw what was going on, I just quietly took my tape recorder and my microphone, put it back in the bag, and just slipped out the back door. It's like, I'm not going to subject myself to this kind of nonsense. That list, both of them, the good people and the bad people, that's going to get real long here. It was just some names I scribbled out here. When the list is complete or semi-complete, we'll come back and take another look at it. Does the name Lou Alcindor mean anything to you? That was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's name before he changed it, and it was on this date back in 1966. Lou Alcindor, still using that name, played his first college basketball game for UCLA. He scored 56 points. Adam Sandler sang the Hanukkah song for the first time during Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update 31 years ago. It was 1994. Good Will Hunting had its world premiere on this date back in 1997. Tiger Woods' world began to crumble 16 years ago this weekend, back in 2009. That's when he publicly apologized for having an affair with a cocktail waitress named Jamie Grubbs. A lot of people thought maybe the thing would blow over until they found out there was a long list of Jamie Grubbses. 45 years ago this weekend, Led Zeppelin called it quits when John Bonham died, and they said, we can't go on as Led Zeppelin. Forget it. We're done. We are about, it's less than 2 weeks away from what is supposed to be the release of the Epstein files. I don't know about you, but I will be the most surprised guy in the world if those Epstein files are released without redactions. I don't know what excuse they're going to come up with. I don't know what's going to happen, but something will happen between now and like 12 days from now, which is the deadline. We're never going to see those Epstein files. We're never going to see them. But it sure is going to be interesting to watch as it plays out, as we sort of figure out how it's going to play out. My daughter is 16, and we're not doing the allowance thing. We just say, when you need something, tell us, we'll take you shopping. That's going to change eventually here, but according to a new study, the average kid's allowance is now $52 a month. It's about $13 a week. And 61% of parents say their kids are more financially responsible with money than they were at the same age. This one I don't completely understand. The Internal Revenue Service has been ravaged. Your chances of being audited are pretty small these days because they just don't have enough agents and they're cutting everything. The IRS right now is looking into OnlyFans accounts. That's where you have these suburban young women and MILFs who say, I look fantastic. And if people are going to pay me to look at my breastular area, I'm going to go for it. Beats working. Anyhow, the IRS looking into OnlyFans accounts because there's an exception in the new no tax on tips law that says you still have to pay on tips earned from pornographic activity. I've never been on OnlyFans, so I don't know. So you got to pay for it. You got to subscribe to the service. Then you got to pay the woman whatever she's asking for, depending on, I'm assuming, how good she looks and what she is doing once she disrobes. But apparently you got to tip them too. A lot of people don't like cranberry sauce. I love cranberry sauce. I bought 2 big bags and we boiled it up and made it. And you got to put an awful lot of sugar in. That's about the only thing I know I shouldn't be doing. Should be consuming that amount of sugar. And you got to put a lot in. A lot of people go with the canned stuff where you still see the ridges of the can on this jelly-like wobbling little thing that sits on the plate, and then you just slice a piece off. That, to me, is not cranberry sauce. That's cranberry gel or something. Anyhow, on Thanksgiving, a lot of people were like, oh, honey, open those 2 cans of cranberry sauce, and let's put it on the plate. And when they opened the can, there was nothing but water inside. No cranberry gel. Ocean Spray says they're looking into it. I guess. I don't know where this stuff goes on in the state of Florida. I never see any of this stuff. You know how there's always some goofy story? A Florida man. It always starts off with a Florida man. And then the story goes from there, and it usually involves snakes or some robbery that went awry or people just doing things where you're like, what the hell? You did what? And I know that particularly when women go on vacation, there's an old joke. What's motel spelled backwards? And the answer is let them. You know what I mean? And there's been references many, many times to hotel sex. So, we go down to the Florida Keys, which is where this took place, the story I'm about to read to you. That I can understand because people go on vacation, they hit the Florida Keys. It's the holiday, and it's like, whoop-pee, all right? Let's just go nuts. So anyhow, this past Saturday, police show up to the parking lot of a supermarket where they found people having a threesome in the supermarket parking lot. They were all drunk, by the way, and it was about noon. like I said, vacations. And here in the United States, as you know, we do not use the metric system. And I think it's like us and someplace like Sri Lanka or something, the only two places on earth that don't use the metric system. There was a movement back in the late 1970s to force the United States of America to convert to the metric system. And a lot of people fought back. There was a writer in Chicago by the name of Bob Greene who started a counter group called WHAM, We Ain't Metric. You know, you get a little bit of it because you got like, you know, the 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola, but you know, outside of that, you don't see a lot of references to the metric system here in America. And I got the same problem with money when I go to Toronto, for example, a beautiful city. I love going there. But, you know, you go to the airport or something and you want to get a frozen yogurt while you're waiting for your flight, and suddenly you're 5 years old again. You just take all of your Canadian money, put it in the palm of your hand, and then just hold it out, and you present it to the cashier. It's just like, just take whatever it is. I can't figure out this conversion. Well, it turns out it even goes further than that. And I didn't know this, by the way. There were people on an Air Canada flight last week, and they put all this stuff on TikTok. And the passenger on the plane, this Air Canada flight, was just absolutely horrified because on their meal, the expiration date said 5/11/25. Which meant that this meal was about 6 months old. Aha! But people in the comments pointed out that most non-U.S. countries format the date as day, then month, rather than the month being first. If you were born in 1960, you would write 2/1/60. Aha! But in Canada, lots of other countries, it's the other way around. It would have been 1/2/60. That's something I didn't know. This show is so educational. And here's something sort of sobering. The actress Jennifer Lawrence, and I love Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's probably half nuts, but when you see some of her performances, they're just unbelievable. She had almost no acting training, no formal training as an actress. She's just doing this off the top of her head. A lot of people missed the movie Joy, and if you get a chance and you didn't see it, rent the movie Joy, because everybody's seen her big movies, but a lot of people missed that one, and it is not the kind of movie you should miss. It's really, really good. Anyhow, Jennifer Lawrence, it turns out, was born only 9 days after JonBenet Ramsey. JonBenet Ramsey was born August 6, 1990. Jennifer Lawrence, August 15th, 1990. So JonBenet Ramsey would have turned 35 this year. Does everybody know who Lily Allen is? She's a Canadian singer and songwriter. She actually put out a song back in 2009 called Blank You, except it didn't say blank. Anyhow, she's very popular, and she has a new album, and she's selling that album in USB drives that are shaped like backdoor love toys.
No, I wrote a great cookbook, great desserts, because everyone buys their desserts.
Yes.
Everyone goes to a bakery. Go home, do a dessert.
Okay.
I cut the fat.
not now.
Not now. You have a show to do. I cut the sugar. I cut the fat. I made it delicious. I want people to get motivated because, you know, you can gain 8 to 10 pounds by January 1st.
People do this
They
at
do.
the holidays, and this is a terrible
they
time.
eat, and then December 31st, they're holding the last rum ball. The last rum ball in their hand, and they go, "Dear God, why did I do it again this
That was
year?"
83 Coppola, wasn't it? The last
Yeah,
rum
last
ball?
rum ball, fabulous movie.
I love that movie.
Fabulous
But
movie.
the ending with the helicopters, I didn't like that. That scared me a little too much.
Radio? Who needs a radio?
Like what you're hearing? Don't forget JC's Wayback Machine every Saturday night from 6 until 9 on 101.9 and 94.1 News Talk STL and the free News Talk STL app.
And that stuff will get you in the Christmas mood. It will not get you into the Christmas mood if you still haven't put up your lights, because if you're out there and it's like 17 degrees and you're trying to hang lights, you'll be cussing like you're in a Tarantino movie. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I brought up a question, sort of a rhetorical question, just more of an opportunity for you to think a little bit. But the question was this: can you imagine what St. Louis would be like, particularly in terms of anticipation of bad weather and in terms of the way the weather people handled it on TV, can you imagine how life in St. Louis would be different if the blizzard of 82 had never happened? Because that's the problem. That's the whole thing. Everybody who was around in 82 remembers how awful that was, and they're afraid it's going to happen again. And that's why I invented the Schnucks Panic Aisle. People laugh, and even some people complain because it sounds so real. If you're in your car, it sounds like the cops are right behind you, or maybe a fire truck. And we were laughing earlier in the week, too, when we had the heavy snowfall, the accumulating snow, because you have all these little newbies who aren't even from St. Louis running around the newsrooms going, who is Art Hill? I hear everybody talking about Art Hill. Does he have something to do with the weather or something? Because all I hear is people bringing up the name Art Hill. It's like, no, dummy. Art Hill is where you go sledding. It's not a person. It's a place. But I digress.
And now, you know it. I know it. It sucked then. It sucks now.
Back in the late 60s, there was a band that nobody could seem to find out too much about. It was led by a guy who had the name Ron Dante. Ron Dante. And people started digging around. They're like, okay, well, he's got this band, the Cufflinks, and they had a song, Tracy, when I'm with you, something you do. You know, one of those typical late 60s, early 70s sappy love songs. And then one day we were sitting there at the radio station, and somebody says there's a new song out by the Archies. Well, the Archies are a comic book. They're like, yeah, but they have a band. I go, how can people who aren't really people, they're just one-dimensional pictures of drawings on a page. How can they have a band? Like, well, they do. Well, it turns out that was Ron Dante. And the only other thing you need to know about him is that he sang background vocals and had a hand in the production of something like the first 7 Barry Manilow albums. Sort of tells you everything you need to know. Well, the joke was on us, because at the end of 1969, they published the most popular songs of the year in order, and number 1 for the entire year, 1969, was this. There's that name again, Ron Dante. In the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later.
Go away like things go away.
Bye.